He was supposed to be standing at the altar in less than 3 hours, dressed in a charcoal gray suit, holding the hands of the woman he'd sworn to love forever. Instead, his phone was found buzzing inside an empty car. Engine still warm. Driver's door wide open. Keys still in the ignition. And not a trace of him anywhere. People say weddings are emotional. But this one turned into a crime scene before the flowers were even delivered. Because the groom didn't just disappear. He vanished, leaving behind a trail of things nobody expected. A voicemail he never meant to send. A jacket he never took with him. A secret folder hidden under his bed. And a fear in the bride's voice that no one could ignore. The morning sun kept rising. The caterers kept setting up the tables. Guests kept driving to the venue smiling, unaware. While the bride kept staring at the front door, waiting for the man who had promised her forever. But forever was already gone. By noon, his best man would be the first to panic. By 1 p.m., the bride's father would be calling the police. By 3 p.m., an officer would tape off the parking lot where his car was abandoned. And by sundown, everyone in that small town would be whispering the same sentence. He didn't run away. Something happened to him. Because the truth is, people don't just disappear hours before the happiest moment of their lives. Not unless something darker is lurking underneath the surface. Not unless someone, or something, was waiting for him that morning. And before this story is over, you will understand exactly why. Why he vanished. Why nobody saw it coming. And why the bride refused to cancel the wedding, even after the police told her the truth. This is not a love story. This is not a mystery that fades away with time. This is a descent into the final hours of a man who lived a life nobody fully understood. A man who woke up ready to become a husband, and never walked out his front door again. Welcome to the Crime Lens, where every secret eventually sees the light. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because the stories we tell aren't just dark. They're the kind that stay with you. The ones that make you double-check your locks at night. The ones that make you wonder how well you really know the people in your life. So sit back, turn off the lights, and listen closely, because the next 40 minutes will take you inside the final morning of a groom who had everything to live for, and everything to fear. And it all begins with the last person who saw him alive. Let's start from the beginning. His name was Evan Mercer, and at 32 years old, he had the kind of presence people remembered even if they only met him once. Not because he was loud or overly confident or the type to dominate a room, he wasn't. Evan had this quiet, steady aura that made people feel like they could trust him. Like he was the guy who would show up early, stay late, and somehow still make it seem effortless. To most, Evan was the definition of a solid man. Reliable. Predictable in a good way. Someone who didn't cause waves or draw attention. He worked as an IT technician at a mid-sized logistics company, the kind of job that paid well enough, didn't stress him too much, and fit his introverted, calm nature. His coworkers liked him. The type of like that wasn't loud or enthusiastic. More like, oh yeah, Evan? He's a good dude. Quiet but solid. He brought the same lunch to work almost every day. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, black coffee. It became a running joke in the office. Evan's fuel never changes. But he would just smile, shrug, and say, well, why fix something if it works? It wasn't that he lacked personality. He was just consistent. Predictable in a comforting way. His habits were small but noticeable. He ran every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, no matter the weather. He kept his apartment neat, almost overly neat, everything folded, lined up, arranged with intention. His clothes were simple, blues, grays, blacks, nothing flashy. He didn't care about brands, he cared about feeling comfortable. He liked quiet music, old books, slow mornings, and the smell of rain. But here's the thing about Evan Mercer. For someone who radiated calmness, he carried a weight. People felt it without being able to explain it. A heaviness in his eyes that flickered on bad days. A momentary pause before answering certain questions. A quiet breath he'd take when he thought no one was looking. You wouldn't call it sadness. More like something he never fully put down. His mother would notice it sometimes. She'd tilt her head and say, "You sure everything's all right, sweetheart?" And Evan would flash that small, careful smile, the one that never reached his eyes, and say, "Yeah, Mom. Just tired." His father didn't push. Not because he didn't care, he just respected privacy. He had raised Evan to handle things on his own, and the boy took that lesson too deeply, maybe. To his friends, Evan was the quiet anchor of the group. He wasn't the loud storyteller or the guy cracking jokes. But if someone needed help moving or needed a ride or needed someone to talk to at midnight, Evan always showed up. Without complaining. Without making it dramatic. He was dependable in a way that made people grateful but also slightly guilty, because you could feel he never asked for anything in return. To them he was good. Just good. But to Lena, his bride-to-be, he was something else entirely. She met him in a coffee shop 2 years before the wedding. He had been sitting alone, typing on his laptop with a furrowed brow, when she accidentally spilled part of her latte on his table. She was mortified. He just laughed, a low, warm sound that instantly softened her embarrassment. There was a gentleness to him from the first second. A calming presence that wrapped around her like warmth. She used to say that being with Evan felt like sitting in a quiet room with soft lighting. Peaceful, safe, steady. But even she saw the cracks sometimes. There were nights where he'd retreat into himself without warning. Moments where he'd stare at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Times where he'd avoid certain topics too quickly. Family arguments, finances, anything involving his past. He didn't lie. He just didn't talk. When she'd ask, "What's wrong?" he'd smile that same careful smile and say, "Nothing. It's been a long day." And she believed him because he never gave her a real reason not to. Evan treated Lena the way quiet men often love. Steadily. With intention. With a softness that doesn't brag or boast or try to impress anyone. He showed up with flowers on normal days, not anniversaries. He listened more than he spoke. He remembered everything, her favorite songs, her coffee order, the exact shade of blue she said reminded her of her childhood bedroom. To Lena, Evan was the safest place she had ever known. Her friends loved him. Her parents adored him. Everyone said she got lucky. Good men like him are rare. And she felt lucky. But deep down, beneath all the warmth, she sensed something he never told her. Something that lived behind his eyes. Something he had carried long before he met her. She once joked, "You talk like someone who's lived 2 lives." Evan had gone quiet for a moment. Too quiet. Then he kissed her forehead and said, barely above a whisper, "Sometimes it feels that way." She thought he meant it metaphorically. She didn't know that by the time they planned their wedding, by the time invitations were mailed and the venue was booked, by the time she picked out her dress, Evan had already made a private promise to himself. "Whatever I'm running from, I'll handle it after the wedding." He truly believed he'd be able to outrun his past for one more day. Just one more morning. Just enough time to say, "I do," and finally start over. He never got that chance. Because whatever Evan had been running from his whole life finally caught up to him the morning he disappeared. Her name was Lena Whitmore, and to anyone who met her, she radiated warmth. Not the kind of warmth that demanded attention or made people stop in their tracks. No, hers was quiet, gentle, a subtle glow that lingered when she left a room. She worked as a curator at a small art gallery, surrounded by muted colors, textures, and paintings that told stories. Her life was orderly, predictable, and safe, a perfect counterbalance to Evan's quiet intensity. Lena was the type of woman who noticed details most people missed. The way a leaf would drift across a sidewalk, the faint scent of rain on a brick wall, the slight hesitation in someone's smile. It was this attentiveness that drew her to Evan the first time she saw him. Not because he was charming or handsome, but because she saw the quiet attention he gave to the world. The way he examined the table at the coffee shop before he sat down, the way he adjusted the napkins meticulously, as if every small thing mattered. Their meeting was almost cinematic in its simplicity. She had spilled a latte, a clumsy moment, yet he didn't flinch. He smiled, soft and steady, and reassured her with a calmness that immediately dissolved the tension in her chest. That moment became a memory she revisited often. The way he laughed, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the way he made her feel unseen worries melt away. Over the next months, they spoke in quiet corners of cafes, walked streets lined with autumn leaves, and exchanged stories that built a fragile, steady intimacy. What she loved about him wasn't a single quality. It was the combination of things others might not notice. His patience, his meticulous care, the way he listened without waiting to reply, the little gestures, a hand resting briefly on hers in a crowded room, an unexpected note tucked into her bag, remembering the way she liked her tea. He was dependable, yes, but not predictably so. He was thoughtful in ways that weren't obvious, ways that made her feel seen and eventually safe. And yet, in the quiet spaces of their life together, there were moments Lena couldn't explain. The subtle hints that something felt off. A pause in Evan's conversation that lasted a fraction too long. A distracted glance at his phone when she entered the room. Moments when his smile seemed forced, as though it were a mask he wore for her, for the world. She tried to rationalize it. Stress at work, minor anxieties, nothing serious. But sometimes, when the house was quiet and they were alone, she would catch him staring out the window for minutes at a time, and she'd feel a small ripple of unease pass through her chest. Still, she loved him fiercely. She loved him in the way people love those who make them feel both grounded and alive. She had spent countless nights imagining their future. A home filled with laughter, trips to art galleries together, quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers. She had bought the dress she had dreamed of since she was a child, the one that hugged her in all the right places and flowed into the floor in soft, ivory waves. The invitations had gone out, the flowers had been chosen, the band confirmed. Everything felt real, solid, and joyous. But in the last week leading up to the wedding, Lena felt the world tilt ever so slightly. Evan had been quieter than usual, leaving her with questions she didn't dare ask. He was still kind, attentive, and loving, but something about the way he avoided certain topics. Calls from old friends, discussions about the honeymoon, even a casual inquiry from her mother about family matters, felt like the faint tremor before an earthquake. She brushed it off, telling herself she was being paranoid, that the stress of the final week before the wedding was weighing on both of them. The morning of the wedding, Lena woke before dawn, unable to sleep. Sunlight had not yet broken the horizon, but she could hear the faint hum of the town waking outside her window. She moved through the suite in a daze, adjusting her dress, checking her notes for the ceremony, ensuring everything was perfect. Her heart thudded with excitement, but there was a persistent, inexplicable knot in her stomach. Something she couldn't name. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the small details. The delicate lacework on her gown, the arrangement of the flowers, the gentle music playing softly in the background. She had arranged for her bridesmaids to meet in the suite, for the hair and makeup to be perfect, for the photographs to capture every moment, every smile, every laugh, every tear. And yet, as she waited for the moment Evan would arrive, that subtle, insistent feeling, that something was off, grew stronger. She told herself it was pre-wedding nerves, the kind that made the world feel slightly unreal, that made every second stretch too long. When she finally checked her phone, she saw it. A single missed call. From Evan. Her stomach twisted. She called back, her fingers trembling slightly, but it went straight to voicemail. She left a trembling message, trying to sound casual, trying to mask the rising panic. "Hey. I'm ready. Where are you?" No response. Her bridesmaids noticed her tension and whispered among themselves, offering reassurances she didn't feel. Minutes passed. She walked to the window, looking for any sign of him, any figure approaching through the morning fog, any car that might carry him. But the street outside remained empty, silent, ominously still. That knot in her stomach became a tightening band around her chest. She tried to rationalize it again. Maybe he got held up in traffic, maybe the car broke down, maybe something trivial. But deep down, Lena sensed the truth wasn't so simple. There was a darkness hovering at the edge of her perfect day, a shadow she couldn't shake. She didn't know it yet, but by the time the sun had risen fully and the town had begun to buzz with wedding day excitement, Evan Mercer, the man she loved more than anything in the world, would be nowhere to be found. And the story of that morning, the unraveling of his disappearance and the secrets it would expose, would change her life, and the lives of everyone who knew him, forever. The morning began quietly, almost deceptively so. Outside, the town was draped in a soft gray light, the kind that makes shadows feel heavier and streets look longer than they are. A thin mist clung to the trees lining the road to the church, curling around lampposts like smoke, blurring edges and softening the air. Birds sang occasionally, but even their songs seemed hesitant, unsure, like they too felt the subtle tension lurking in the day. Inside Lena's suite, the energy was electric yet frayed at the edges. Bridesmaids moved in a carefully orchestrated chaos, adjusting dresses, checking makeup, smoothing hair. There was laughter, a little forced, a little nervous, and the clatter of high heels and brushes and perfume bottles. Each moment was punctuated by the ticking of the antique clock on the wall, a constant reminder that time was marching forward, bringing the ceremony ever closer. Lena herself moved in a daze. Every detail she had spent months imagining now existed in the physical world. The ivory lace of her gown, soft and flowing, the delicate pearl necklace resting against her collarbone, the bouquet of white roses and lilies she held with trembling hands. Her heart beat fast, a rhythmic drum of excitement and nerves intertwined. She smiled when her mother adjusted the veil, but the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. Down the street, in a small rental car parked haphazardly in the foggy morning, Evan Mercer was nowhere to be seen. His suit, meticulously pressed the night before, hung neatly on a chair in his apartment. Shoes polished to a reflective shine sat patiently at the foot of the wardrobe. His watch rested where he had left it, ticking, measuring time that he would never arrive to meet. At the groom's family home, His parents were bustling with nervous energy. His mother fussed over the catering trays, making sure nothing was missing while his father double-checked the car. Once, twice, 3 times. Every time the doorbell rang, they assumed it was him, and every time it wasn't, the unease grew just a fraction. At the church, chairs were being lined up with precise symmetry, candles lit with steady hands, and flowers arranged so perfectly they looked as if they'd been planted there for centuries. The air smelled faintly of fresh lilies, polished wood, and waxed floors. Choir members hummed quietly as they tuned their voices. Everything seemed normal. Perfect. And yet, something wasn't right. Lena's bridesmaids had noticed it first. A text, a missed call, a small delay that should have meant nothing but now felt like an omen. The first whispers of worry had been subtle, just a small furrowed brow or a hand pressed against a mouth to stifle concern. Lena herself had tried to ignore it, focusing on the veil, the flowers, the photographs. She told herself he was fine. He would be here any moment. He was always punctual. Always careful. Always reliable. Time moved slowly, dragging at the edges of their nerves. Each tick of the clock seemed louder than the last, echoing against the walls of the suite and the empty hallways of the church. The caterers checked trays again. The photographer adjusted the angle of the light. And still no Evan Mercer. Then came the first real sign that something was wrong. It was his phone, buzzing insistently on the table near the front door. A missed call from the bride. Then another. And another. His best man's calls went unanswered as well. One of the bridesmaids picked it up to leave a message, but it went straight to voicemail. There was no reply. No reassurance. Nothing. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands trembled as she gripped the bouquet a little tighter. The room seemed to shrink around her, the soft sunlight turning gray through the misted windows. Her mother's voice was gentle but trembling. Maybe he's just stuck in traffic, honey? But Lena knew. She felt it deep in her chest. This wasn't traffic. This wasn't a delay. Something was wrong. Panic began to ripple outward. The bridesmaids whispered hurriedly, checking texts and watches. Her father made a call, just a quick inquiry, and his expression tightened, something in his jaw refusing to hide the worry. Guests began arriving, some laughing and chatting, others glancing at the clock, and a subtle tension spread through the air. The perfect morning had fractured in invisible shards. By 10:30 a.m., Lena's stomach had settled into a steady, sickening knot. She walked to the window, staring down the street as fog twisted around the parked cars. Her veil brushed against her cheek, her hands shaking slightly. Every sound, a car engine, a distant dog barking, a bird taking flight, made her heart leap. Each moment stretched longer than the last. And then the truth started to become unavoidable. His car wasn't coming down the street. His footsteps weren't echoing on the church stone. No familiar shadow appeared in the mist. Lena's mother touched her shoulder gently, her voice quivering. "Sweetheart, he'll be here, won't he?" But Lena's eyes were fixed outside, wide and searching. Her heart beat in a frantic rhythm, each pulse a drum of fear. And in that moment, with the fog swallowing the morning light and the flowers smelling too sweet, too innocent, the room understood what she already knew. Evan Mercer, the man she was about to marry, had vanished. The realization sank into the bones of everyone present. Whispers rose in stifled tones. The photographer paused, camera hanging loosely by his side. Bridesmaids exchanged worried glances. Even the distant birds seemed to hush, as if acknowledging the tension. And there, in that quiet, fog-laden morning, the perfect, joyous wedding day transformed into a haunting question mark. Where was Evan Mercer? And why had he disappeared hours before the moment he had spent his whole life anticipating? The town would soon wake fully to a wedding without a groom. And the story of his disappearance, the secrets, the lies, and the darkness that had followed him all this time, was only beginning. The first 24 hours after Evan Mercer vanished were a blur of confusion, panic, and the creeping realization that nothing about him, nothing anyone thought they knew, was as it seemed. Lena clung to fragments of hope, convincing herself that this was a simple miscommunication, a bizarre accident, maybe even a prank gone wrong. But the deeper they dug, the more impossible it became to ignore the truth. Police arrived within the hour of the first frantic calls. Officers moved with quiet efficiency, canvassing the streets, checking the fog-laden alleys, questioning neighbors who had barely registered the morning's tension. They noted the abandoned car, the keys still in the ignition, the suit jacket neatly draped over the passenger seat, his wallet on the console. Nothing seemed stolen. Nothing seemed out of place, except the man himself. And absence, it turns out, is more telling than presence. Meanwhile, Lena and Evan's family combed through his apartment, driven by a desperate need for answers. At first, everything appeared ordinary: neat shelves, minimal clutter, a meticulously clean kitchen, and a stack of unread books lined up on the living room table. His bed was perfectly made, his clothes carefully folded. Yet as they looked closer, tiny cracks appeared in the illusion of normalcy. On the desk, partially hidden beneath a pile of blank notepads, they found an envelope, worn at the edges, handwritten but unsigned. Inside were receipts. Expensive, carefully coded receipts for hotels and dinners in cities Evan had never mentioned visiting. Next to it was a notebook, pages filled with numbers, dates and shorthand that none of them recognized. Lena flipped through, heart pounding, trying to make sense of the seemingly random scrawl. Some pages had names she didn't know, unfamiliar women, men and businesses she'd never heard of, but each entry was meticulously detailed, almost obsessive. The handwriting was precise, almost surgical. Her mother noticed another layer to the mystery: small photographs tucked behind picture frames. Not of family or friends, but strangers, people with no obvious connection to Evan, their faces caught in candid, unguarded moments. Some were in cafes, some in parks, some leaving hotels. Lena's stomach knotted as she realized Evan had been keeping track of lives she knew nothing about, memories he'd been capturing silently, obsessively. The police discovered more. Evan's phone, unlocked by forensic technicians, revealed dozens of chats with people none of his family or friends had ever met. Some were mundane, casual greetings, work-related messages, but others were encrypted, disappearing messages, references to meetings at odd hours and faraway locations. His social media accounts, once carefully curated to show a life of quiet normalcy, had shadow pages, accounts in alternate names, pictures and posts deleted after hours, interactions with people he never spoke of aloud. Every layer peeled back revealed another secret carefully constructed to hide a hidden life. And then came the first real shock, something that would make even the most grounded person question everything about who Evan Mercer was. A neighbor, an elderly woman who had known Evan for years, recalled seeing a man who looked exactly like him, same height, build, hair, leave the apartment the previous night carrying a briefcase and walking with a sense of purpose, disappearing into the misty streets around midnight. But Evan's apartment door had been locked, and his keys were inside. The police cross-checked surveillance cameras. Footage was patchy, but the timestamp showed a figure matching Evan's description entering a car parked across the street, leaving in a direction no one could trace. Lena stared at the video, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. Her fiancé, the man she loved, had moved in ways she had never witnessed. She pressed her fingers to her lips, heart hammering. Then there were the bank records, another shock. Transactions that didn't make sense, sudden withdrawals in cities hundreds of miles away, frequent purchases of items that had no explanation. Lena's father shook his head. He was hiding something big, he murmured. Even the police officers, seasoned professionals accustomed to missing persons and petty fraud, exchanged grim glances. By the afternoon, the town was buzzing with hushed conversations and speculative whispers. The family had returned to the apartment, piecing together the strange, disjointed puzzle. Every receipt, every photograph, every unread message, became a breadcrumb leading to a larger, darker picture. And the deeper they looked, the heavier the tension grew. It wasn't just fear for Evan's safety, it was fear of what he had been living, alone and silent, in the shadows of a life they thought they knew. Lena retreated to the bedroom, clutching her hands together as if holding herself upright against a tidal wave of shock. She tried to imagine the man she had fallen in love with, the gentle, reliable, loving Evan, and reconcile him with the meticulous, secretive and calculated life that was now unraveling before her eyes. Her mind raced. Who was he meeting in the middle of the night? Why had he kept a second identity, second contacts, second life? And most terrifyingly, what could happen if someone else knew, someone he had been hiding from? The police had begun checking the envelope's hotel receipts. Each location was meticulously documented. Times, room numbers, contacts. It wasn't random, it was a pattern. A network. And while the exact purpose remained unclear, it painted a picture of Evan Mercer that contradicted everything everyone believed. The calm, quiet man who always showed up, the devoted fiancé, the dependable friend. He was also someone capable of living parallel lives, carefully compartmentalized and secretive, under a veneer of normalcy. By late evening, Lena returned to the suite where the wedding should have taken place. The dress hung perfectly, untouched, the flowers still in place, the music softly humming. But instead of excitement, there was silence. The day that had been meant to celebrate love, unity, and joy had become a stage for suspense, secrets, and fear. Lena's eyes filled with tears, not just for the uncertainty of Evan's disappearance, but for the staggering realization that the man she loved had existed in ways she never could have imagined. And then, just when you think you've understood the story, just when tension seems to reach its peak, there's a new revelation. A message appears on Evan's phone, delayed, never sent until hours later. The message reads, "If you're reading this, it's already too late. Trust no one. Not even me." A simple sentence. But in that moment, every viewer sitting in front of a screen feels it. The stakes have just multiplied. The calm, methodical investigation of a missing man now transforms into something darker. A man who may have been hiding from forces, from secrets, from truths that no one was ready to face. The story doesn't pause. It accelerates. Every unanswered question, every strange receipt, every strange photograph, every ghostly late-night figure, it all points to one thing. Evan Mercer's life, carefully curated, had cracks so deep and secrets so dangerous that the next 24 hours would change everything for Lena, his family, and everyone who believed they knew him. And for you, the viewers, if you think you know the truth, think again. Because Evan Mercer's disappearance is not just a missing person case. It's a descent into a life layered in lies, hidden motives, and the chilling realization that the man you think you know may be a stranger hiding in plain sight. The town had transformed. What had started as a quiet morning now resembled something out of a crime thriller. Fog lingered in the streets like smoke from a fire nobody could see. Police cars, flashing lights muted under the gray morning sky, lined the narrow roads. Patrol officers moved in measured sweeps, radios crackling with static updates. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, whispering hurriedly, their faces etched with unease. Lena and Evan's families coordinated volunteers, while drones hovered above rooftops, their cameras scanning treetops, alleys, and empty parking lots. Every detail was noted. Every small clue catalogued. A discarded water bottle, a trampled patch of grass in a nearby park, a bicycle left leaning against a tree. Nothing was insignificant. And yet, Evan Mercer himself remained invisible, a ghost slipping through the cracks of a town that had once believed in his reliability. Lena moved from one location to another, her hands trembling, her hair disheveled from pacing, her heart hammering in a rhythm that seemed out of sync with the quiet morning. She called out his name, loud, desperate, over streets and sidewalks that felt colder than they had any right to. Volunteers combed through backyards, alleyways, and empty lots, checking every corner with a vigilance born of fear. Each "nothing here" report felt like a dagger twisting in her chest. Officers started interviews. First, the neighbors, a retired man with binoculars, a woman with a dog who walked past Evans Street every morning, a teenager who claimed he saw a man like him, carrying a suitcase down a foggy road. Each account conflicted with the next, adding layers of confusion. The man with binoculars insisted Evan had left around 11:30 p.m., while the teen swore he saw him closer to midnight. Small details became significant. The type of car Evan had entered, the color of his jacket, even the direction of the shadows in the dim light of street lamps. Drones captured images that only deepened the mystery. Evan's car remained parked outside his apartment, untouched. Every street and alley was methodically scanned, but no figure matching his description appeared. The cameras revealed only movement of stray animals, the swaying of tree branches, the odd glint of a metallic object that, when investigated, turned out to be a discarded soda can. Meanwhile, Lena's family and friends searched in person. They combed nearby woods, checking under bridges, inside abandoned sheds, even in the shallow banks of the river that curved around the town's edge. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping branch set their nerves on edge. Volunteers called out, "Evan! Evan!" Their voices swallowed by the fog, their echoes bouncing back as if the town itself was mocking their desperation. The police began to investigate patterns from the receipts and photos found in Evan's apartment. They mapped out locations he had visited in the past month. Cities miles away, addresses unknown to his family, businesses that seemed unrelated. Some led to dead ends. Others suggested meetings with strangers who had vanished as quickly as they appeared. Each lead was followed with care, officers moving slowly to avoid missing anything, aware that the missing man might be somewhere nearby or far away, the next clue lying just out of sight. One of the first real breakthroughs came when a local shop owner remembered Evan purchasing a map just a week before the wedding. It was folded neatly in the back of his car. Officers opened it carefully, tracing each line, each annotation, each small mark he had made. It pointed to locations that made no sense. Parks, backstreets, abandoned warehouses, places Lena had never seen him mention. The discovery added a sense of urgency. Evan's life had layers no one in his world knew about, and perhaps the key to finding him was buried in the same hidden maps. Volunteers found a small jacket in the underbrush of a park. Nothing unusual except for a monogrammed initial that matched Evan's. Lena clutched it to her chest, tears welling in her eyes. Was it his? Had he brushed it off during his flight, or had someone planted it as a cruel misdirection? Police dusted it for prints, photographing every angle, but it revealed little. It became a haunting symbol of both hope and despair, a possibility, a clue, and a taunt all at once. By midday the town's energy had shifted. The initial confusion and frantic activity had turned into a tense, almost ritualized search. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors beating against the fog like the pulse of the city itself. Officers and volunteers coordinated through walkie-talkies, calling in every sighting, every rumor, no matter how small. Social media amplified the tension. Neighbors posted vague observations, "Saw a man like him near the old mill," or, "I swear someone fitting his description walked past my window last night." Each report, verified or not, became part of the narrative of Evan's disappearance. But it was during one of the quieter moments, when Lena had stopped to rest on a bench near the river, that the emotional weight hit her hardest. The cold wind bit at her cheeks and she could hear the distant hum of activity in the streets, but it all felt unreal, disconnected. She replayed memories in her mind. His gentle smile, the way he adjusted his jacket, the warmth in his voice when he reassured her. Each memory now carried an edge of fear, a silent question. Who was he really? And where had he gone? The first night after his disappearance fell like a heavy curtain over the town. Streetlights reflected on wet asphalt, mist curling like smoke. Officers continued patrols, drones swept rooftops, search dogs sniffed alleys, and Lena stood with her mother and bridesmaids at the edge of the church driveway, staring into the fog. Each rustle of leaves, each distant car passing through the mist, made her heart leap and her stomach churn. And then came the call. The police had discovered something in one of the abandoned locations on Evan's mapped routes. A small notebook, open on a dusty table, its pages marked with dates, numbers and shorthand he had used in the hidden layers of his life. Nothing immediately identifiable, but the handwriting, the patterns, the care in each entry confirmed one terrifying truth. Evan Mercer had been planning, calculating, and moving with purpose. Not randomly. Not out of panic. He had known where he would go if he needed to disappear, and he had left breadcrumbs for someone, or maybe only for himself. The volunteers shivered in the mist, the cold air wrapping around them like invisible chains. Lena pressed her hands together, whispering his name into the fog. The story wasn't just about a missing man anymore. It was about the double life he had been living in plain sight. A life filled with secrets, unknown contacts, and calculated movements. Every passing hour made the search more desperate, the stakes higher. For you, the viewer watching this story unfold, this is the moment the narrative tightens its grip. You realize that Evan Mercer's disappearance is not just a random act of misfortune. Every choice he made, every hidden meeting, every secret life he led is converging into one chilling reality. The man everyone thought they knew, the fiancé, the son, the friend, may have vanished by design or may be in danger beyond comprehension. And as night falls over the foggy streets, as the last searchlight sweeps the empty alleys, one thing is terrifyingly clear. The story of Evan Mercer's disappearance has only just begun. The morning had begun with hope. The search had started with optimism. The town, misted in fog, had clung to the belief that Evan Mercer, the quiet, reliable man, would be found, lost, perhaps disoriented, but alive. By the second day, though, hope had begun to fracture, replaced by a gnawing tension that threaded through every conversation, every glance, every footstep in the misty streets. Then came the first undeniable twist, one that would shatter everything the family, the police and Lena had believed about Evan Mercer. It started with a call from the police detective who had been meticulously piecing together Evan's hidden life. Detective Harrow had been reviewing the notebook discovered in the abandoned building, the one filled with dates, coded messages, and strange shorthand that at first seemed indecipherable. Hours of analysis finally yielded clarity. Evan's entries were not random, they were meticulously planned steps toward meeting someone he feared and someone he trusted simultaneously. Lena and her mother sat across from the detective in the dimly lit living room of the apartment. The rain outside tapped lightly against the windows, like soft fingers drumming a morbid rhythm. Lena's hands trembled as she clutched her teacup, the steam swirling into the shadows. "Evan Mercer, he wasn't just hiding things from you," Detective Harrow said, voice measured, careful, almost too calm. "He was hiding a second life, and it's not what anyone imagined." Lena blinked. She swallowed hard. What do you mean? The detective leaned back, fingers steepled. You know the hotels, the receipts, the photographs, the strange transactions? He was involved with a network of people who deal in information. Not criminal activity in the typical sense. But enough that someone, somewhere, wanted him accounted for. Tracked. Controlled. The words fell like ice in Lena's chest. She remembered the message on his phone. If you're reading this, it's already too late. Trust no one. Not even me. And now it made sense. Harrow continued. We've cross-referenced the locations he visited. Most of them are innocuous to anyone else. Cafes, libraries, business offices, but they form a pattern. He wasn't running randomly. He was trying to cover his tracks, disappear from eyes he didn't trust. Lena felt her breath catch. Disappear? Into what? Where? Into a life that you, his family, and even you, Lena, never fully saw, the detective replied. And the twist? We have reason to believe he didn't vanish alone. Someone intervened in his plan. The words hung in the room like smoke. Lena's mind raced. The calm, quiet Evan, the man she had married in her heart, was not just missing. He was being hunted. Or cornered. Or worse. Evidence began to connect. CCTV footage in one of the abandoned warehouse locations, the same one where the notebook was discovered, revealed a figure matching Evan's description, moving with precision. But behind him, shadows shifted unnaturally. Another man. Another presence. Harrow showed Lena the footage. The second figure stayed just out of clear view, slipping in and out of alleyways, an observer rather than a participant. And this person? Lena asked, voice barely audible. Unknown, Harrow replied. But based on what Evan documented in the notebook, they were aware of each other long before the disappearance. Evan knew someone was watching and he tried to anticipate their moves. Which means, the detective paused, letting the implication settle like a stone in Lena's stomach. He was being tracked by someone he couldn't trust. Lena's thoughts spiraled. The man she loved, the one she had planned to marry, had been living in layers of secrecy she could not have imagined. He had kept meticulous records, coded messages, and backup plans, all to protect himself from someone in his past. And now, on the morning he was supposed to walk down the aisle, those carefully laid plans had been intercepted. Hours later, more information arrived. Harrow had traced some of Evan's hotel bookings to the same city where he had supposedly worked on corporate IT projects months earlier. The strange financial transactions pointed toward a person Lena had never met. Someone Evan had once trusted, perhaps a colleague, perhaps an acquaintance from a life he never mentioned. Their connection was cryptic, their intentions unknown. But it was enough to suggest that Evan's disappearance was not accidental. The revelation hit Lena like a physical blow. Evan had been living under a constant shadow. The calm man who adjusted his tie, brewed his coffee, and smiled gently at friends and family was a man in hiding. A man navigating a labyrinth of secrecy and now trapped in it. By evening, the searchers had found a discarded briefcase near a secondary location Evan had visited. Inside were documents and a laptop, heavily encrypted, containing correspondence between Evan and the unknown figure. The emails were carefully worded, tense, deliberate, a dance of coded messages, each step calculated. Harrow summarized the situation. Evan had been trying to sever ties, to disappear completely, but someone had anticipated his moves. The twist became undeniable. Evan's disappearance was not random. It was orchestrated. He had been leading a double life, and that life had finally caught up to him. And yet, the human side of it hit hardest for Lena. She realized that every smile, every gentle gesture, every quiet conversation was now imbued with a dangerous complexity. The man she thought she knew had been fighting unseen battles, hiding truths that were not just secrets but survival strategies. Her love for him remained, but it was now entwined with fear, with uncertainty, with the grim understanding that the person she married, in heart if not legally, was living a life layered with danger. Harrow's final words of the night added the chilling punctuation. Lena, the question now is not whether he will be found. The question is, when he is found, in what condition will he be? And will the person he trusted most have any say in it? Just when you believed this was a missing groom case, it becomes something darker. A man leading a double life, secrets intertwined with danger, and a ticking clock counting down to consequences no one could have anticipated. Evan Mercer's life was a labyrinth of lies and secrets, and his disappearance is only the beginning of a story darker than anyone expected. The night Evan Mercer vanished had been ordinary, in a way only he could have made ordinary feel deceptive. The streets of the town lay blanketed under a dense fog, the faint glow of streetlights reflecting off slick asphalt. It was quiet. Too quiet, some would say later when replaying the events with hindsight sharpened by fear. But to Evan, it was the perfect cover, the kind of night that allowed someone to move unnoticed, to weave between worlds and to disappear in plain sight. The timeline began around 10:45 p.m., based on the surveillance footage pieced together from multiple sources. Evan had left his apartment carrying nothing more than a small leather briefcase. His suit was immaculate, pressed the day before, shoes polished to a mirror's shine. Every step he took was deliberate, measured, not the hurried gait of a man fleeing, but of someone following a plan only he fully understood. He walked to the parked car across the street, the same one recorded by an elderly neighbor's security camera, and paused briefly, scanning the fog-shrouded avenue. His eyes flicked left, then right, settling on shadows in the mist. The air was damp, clinging to his hair and the collar of his coat. A soft breeze carried the faint scent of rain-soaked earth, a smell he seemed to inhale deliberately as though committing the night itself to memory. He entered the car and the footage cut. Hours later, GPS pings would place him at a series of locations across the town, cafes, abandoned warehouses, even a quiet alley near the river, each timestamp meticulously matching the entries in his notebook. What became clear to the police was chilling. Evan was retracing his own footsteps, retracing a life that only existed in fragments and shadows. Inside his briefcase, investigators later discovered folders containing documents, maps and photographs, evidence of people, places and events no one in his family had ever known. Some were innocuous, business contacts, old colleagues. Others were disturbing, photographs of strangers taken surreptitiously, handwritten notes with coded messages, receipts from hotels and cities he had never mentioned. The deeper anyone looked, the more layers of Evan's hidden life emerged, each one darker, more complex than the last. By midnight, the final known movements became particularly eerie. Surveillance placed him near a decrepit warehouse at the outskirts of town, the kind of place abandoned for years, its windows shattered, its doors creaking on rusted hinges. He paused outside, removed his briefcase and appeared to inspect the perimeter. His movements were calm, precise, a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and who had been preparing for this night for months, maybe years. And then the figure appeared. At first it was just a shadow, a vague silhouette that seemed to follow Evan at a distance. But as the fog swirled around the warehouse, it became clear this was no random passerby. The figure moved with the intent of someone who knew Evan, someone who had been anticipating him. A chill would later run down the spine of anyone analyzing the footage. The figure was patient, quiet, and impossibly calculated. Every step Evan took, every glance over his shoulder, every adjustment of the briefcase was mirrored in the shadowy presence, as though an invisible puppeteer had been pulling the strings all along. The last time Evan was captured on any camera, he was standing at the warehouse's main entrance. His posture remained composed, almost casual, but his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. The fear, the tension, the knowledge that the life he had hidden was finally colliding with reality. The figure approached, almost gliding through the fog, and Evan's briefcase was suddenly in motion, dropped or taken. The footage was too grainy to confirm. The next moments were obscured by mist and darkness. Police reconstructing the night could only speculate. Some argued that Evan had tried to confront the figure, to negotiate, to explain. Others suspected he had been forced into hiding, dragged into a secret he had long evaded. The remaining evidence, an abandoned coat near the river, footprints that led into the woods and vanished, and the faint outline of a car leaving at speed, painted a picture both precise and terrifying. Back in Lena's suite, as the news reached her, the world tilted on its axis. She clutched the curtains, staring into the fog, imagining his movements, retracing his steps in her mind. Each location, each cryptic note, each shadow he had followed or been followed by, seemed to whisper his absence into her ears. The calm, gentle man she had fallen in love with had been navigating a maze of secrets and danger, and now the labyrinth had swallowed him whole. And this is where the story takes its darkest turn. Investigators pieced together a chilling pattern. Evan had not been hiding from nothing. He had been hiding from someone who knew him, someone who understood every calculated move he made. Whoever this person was, they had waited for the perfect moment, the wedding day, when Evan would be preoccupied, surrounded by family, vulnerable in ways he had never allowed himself to be before. As the fog lifted slightly at dawn, the search intensified. Drones scanned rooftops, officers combed the riverbanks, volunteers lined the streets. Yet the man whose life had seemed so predictable, so grounded in quiet reliability, remained missing. His double life had been revealed piece by piece, a puzzle more terrifying with every new fragment. And the audience, watching every twist and turn, is left with a question that lingers like the morning mist. Who is Evan Mercer really? Where did he go? And will anyone survive the secrets he carried with him into the shadows? The final frames of this segment close in on the foggy warehouse, empty now, silent except for the echoes of footsteps that may or may not have existed. The briefcase is gone. The shadowy figure vanished. And somewhere in the hidden corridors of a life layered with deception, Evan Mercer waits, or fights, or disappears further. This story is no longer about a missing groom, it is about a man whose entire existence has been a careful orchestration of truth and lies, and whose fate remains uncertain, terrifying, and utterly compelling. The day after Evan Mercer vanished felt heavier than any night that preceded it. Fog had lifted slightly, revealing a town that appeared ordinary at first glance, yet beneath the calm lay the thick pulse of fear and unanswered questions. Police had expanded the search radius, canvassed neighboring towns, and interrogated the few contacts Evan had ever trusted. Each lead either dead-ended or deepened the labyrinth of secrets he had been living. Lena paced the living room of her apartment, the once bright walls now dimmed by tension and exhaustion. Her wedding gown still hung in the closet, untouched, the silk catching the morning sun in soft folds. She had tried to sleep, tried to distract herself, but her thoughts constantly returned to the last image she had of Evan. The briefcase in his hand, the fog curling around his shoes, the shadow trailing him through the empty streets. Detective Harrow had called, urging her to meet at the police station. There, amid the hum of fluorescent lights and the low murmur of officers processing evidence, the first shocking resolution began to surface. What we've found, Harrow began, voice low, careful, changes everything we thought we knew. Lena's stomach nodded. Every instinct screamed that she was about to hear something that could shatter the remnants of trust she held onto. The abandoned warehouse, Harrow continued, was not just a random stop. It was a meeting point. One that Evan prepared for meticulously. He expected someone there, and he got more than he bargained for. Images flickered on a nearby monitor. Security footage, photos from a drone, close-ups of documents recovered from Evan's briefcase. Lena studied each frame, her eyes darting across the screen, searching for familiarity. But what she saw was unsettling. Evan had been working against someone he had once trusted. A former colleague, a man named Gideon Voss, whose history with Evan suggested a shared secret too dangerous to reveal. The photographs showed Gideon approaching Evan at the warehouse. At first they appeared almost cordial, a brief handshake, a nod, an exchange of words inaudible on tape. Then the tension escalated. Gideon's posture shifted, stiff and purposeful, his expression unreadable but menacing. Evan's briefcase moved suddenly as if snatched, and then a struggle, subtle, contained, yet undeniably intense, unfolded. The footage faded into grainy darkness, leaving only the echo of footsteps and a faint metallic sound. Harrow turned to Lena, expression grave. Evan Mercer did not vanish by choice. He was confronted. And in the aftermath he was taken, or worse. Evidence points to foul play orchestrated by someone intimately familiar with him and his secret life. The words hit Lena like ice water. A part of her had feared the truth, a part refused to believe it. But the evidence was irrefutable. Evan's double life, the careful planning, the coded messages, the shadowed meetings, had finally caught up with him. The very networks he had relied on to stay hidden had betrayed him in the end. By midday the investigation uncovered more. A series of encrypted messages on Evan's laptop, recovered from the briefcase, revealed his final communication. It was chilling, composed but desperate. If anyone finds this, know that I tried to protect you all. I misled you to save those I loved. If I am gone, trust no one. They are closer than you think. Lena's hands trembled as she read the words. Every letter carried weight, a final warning, a confession, and a plea all at once. She realized the depth of the danger that had been lurking beneath Evan's calm exterior, a danger he had shielded her from, shielded everyone from, until it was too late. The breakthrough came later that evening. Officers tracing the locations from the encrypted messages discovered a small cabin on the outskirts of a neighboring county. The place was isolated, surrounded by thick woods, and had been abandoned for years. Inside they found evidence of a struggle, overturned furniture, shattered glass, traces of Evan's briefcase, and a single, unmistakable clue, Evan's signature watch, cracked but intact, lying beneath a chair. No body. No Gideon. Just traces of a man who had been forced to disappear, leaving behind the life he had tried so carefully to conceal. The final revelation for Lena was more personal and painful. A hidden folder on Evan's laptop contained photographs of her, candid shots taken from across the street, outside the apartment, during their private moments, suggesting that Evan had feared that someone was watching her. His warnings, his coded plans, his hidden life, had been in part to protect her from the same unknown dangers he faced. The realization crushed her. The man she loved had led a double life not merely for himself but to shield her from a world she had never known existed. By nightfall, the town was quiet again, but the sense of unease lingered. Lena returned home, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but determination glinted in them. She had glimpsed the hidden life of Evan Mercer, a life filled with danger, secrets, and consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine. And while the mystery of his fate remained unresolved, one truth was now undeniable. Evan Mercer had been a man living in shadows, and those shadows were far darker and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Lena's voice, trembling but resolute, whispers, "If you think you knew him, think again. His story is only the beginning. And the truth is far darker than you ever imagined." The town had returned, superficially, to its rhythm. Streets buzzed with normal life, shops reopened, children played in the fading sunlight, and the fog that had clung so heavily to every corner had lifted. Yet beneath the ordinary veneer, the memory of Evan Mercer's disappearance lingered like a shadow refusing to dissipate. People whispered in cafes, exchanged knowing glances in the grocery store, and glanced nervously at their doors after dark. The story of the man with two lives had seeped into every corner, coloring every mundane detail with unease. Lena sat in the quiet of her apartment, the wedding gown still hanging untouched in the closet. She had spent days combing through every document, photograph, and digital trace Evan had left behind. Each item told a story, not the story of the man she thought she knew, but a story layered with deception, danger, and a meticulous attempt to protect those he loved. She had laughed, cried, and cursed in turns, navigating the emotional landscape of someone who had lived in shadows while she had lived in light. Her mother came into the room, a cup of tea in hand. She sat silently beside Lena, offering quiet companionship rather than words. Neither of them needed to speak to acknowledge the truth. Evan's life had been a puzzle, a carefully orchestrated labyrinth that no one had been fully prepared to understand. Detective Harrow had provided a final briefing before departing for the next phase of the investigation. "We may never fully know where he is," Harrow admitted, his voice measured. "But every clue he left, every breadcrumb, tells us something essential. He lived a life in the shadows for a reason. And those shadows aren't gone. They're still out there." The weight of those words pressed down on Lena like a physical force. She realized that closure, the neat ending she had imagined, would never come. Not now and perhaps not ever. But she also realized something else. Evan Mercer's story was more than a missing man. It was a lesson in hidden depths, in the complexity of the people we think we know, and in the consequences of secrets carried too long, too carefully. Outside, the evening sky bled shades of orange and gray, the fading sunlight catching the edges of the trees like fiery fingers. Lena stepped to the window, looking down at the streets she had walked countless times. Each shadow seemed heavier now, more significant. She imagined Evan moving through the fog, retracing steps only he fully understood, and wondered whether he had found safety, or if the danger that had chased him for years was still closing in. And then, for a moment, there was a faint sense of connection. Lena realized that Evan had left her something invaluable, the awareness that every person has depths unseen, secrets buried beneath surfaces that seem calm and ordinary. His disappearance had revealed both the fragility and resilience of human trust. And in that understanding she found a strange, difficult clarity. The camera pans over the apartment, the untouched wedding dress, the scattered papers, the soft light filtering through the blinds, before settling on Lena, sitting with her hands clasped, staring ahead. Her voice, soft but steady, narrates. "Evan Mercer taught us something we couldn't have learned any other way. The lives we lead, the choices we make, and the secrets we keep can ripple far beyond what we imagine. And sometimes, the truth doesn't come gently. Sometimes it comes like fog, creeping into every corner, hiding in plain sight. If this story has gripped you, if it has left you questioning the people around you, then you're not alone. Secrets have a way of coming to light, sometimes too late. And if you want to see the truth unravel even further, make sure you subscribe to the Crime Lens. Because stories like Evan Mercer's aren't finished yet, and the next one may be closer than you think."